Hi, friends. Welcome to today's episode. We are here today with a very special guest that many of you might likely be familiar with, but you may not know that you're familiar with him. Children's author Alastair Heim. Hi, Alistair.
Hello. Hi, how
Welcome,
are you guys
welcome.
doing?
Good.
Good. So, Alistair is the author of 20 children's picture books, including the number one New York's best-selling official sequel to How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And we were lucky enough to have you come to our what's our Santa event?
Morning at the North
Morning
Pole.
at the North Pole for Kansas City Mom Collective, and it was fantastic. And we got to hear a live reading of that, which was really fun. Um, and then, as well as Hello Door, which was named one of the New York Public Library's best books of 2018. The Great Puppy Invasion, which won the 2019 Oklahoma Redbud Read Aloud Award, and Quiet Down, Loud Town, which was named the 2021 Junior Library Guild Gold Standard Selection. And you are represented by Kelly Sinak. Am I saying that correctly?
It's Sonic like the restaurant.
Sonic. That's a very fancy spelling of Sonic.
Yes.
Kelly Sonic of the Andrea Brown Literacy Agency, and you live in Kansas City here with us with your family. So welcome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really, really enjoyed the morning at the North Pole back in December, and it was a lot of fun. I got to see some couple of people I knew already, which was very nice, and but just a great morning reading to kids and interacting with families. And yeah, been in Kansas City for a little over 25 years. I'm actually originally from
Wow.
Wisconsin, but been down here as of February 17th. It was 25 years,
Oh my
which is
gosh, nice.
yeah. The hair was much browner then, and but still as tall.
Still a
So
stop.
Yes. All right. So you kind of started a little bit telling us about this, but tell us a little bit about just your family and a little bit of your background because your background is fascinating to me. So share more with us.
yeah, thank you. So I grew up in Wisconsin. Was there through high school, and then I went to college about 3 or 4 hours north of where I grew up, and graduated in December of '99, and didn't know what to do with my life, and had an uncle that lived in Kansas City. He still lives in Kansas City since 1989, and for some reason Kansas City popped into my brain, so I called my mom. This was before most of us had cell phones, so I called my mom and said, hey, can you see if my uncle would let me come live with him for a little while, just to see if I like Kansas City, and be sure to tell him that I can't pay rent because I really don't have any money right now. And she called me that night and said, yeah, he'd love to have you. So I ended up in February moving down to Kansas City, and just really fell in love with the city. It's the biggest city I've ever lived in. I've been to other big cities, of course, but there's just something about the kind of small town, big cityness of it, and fell in love with that and started. I had graduated with a degree in marketing, so got my first job in the summer of 2000, and then was there for about 4 years. Went to an advertising agency for a couple of years, and then I actually worked for Hallmark Cards for about 14 years as a writer and editorial director there. And yeah, it's just so. Oh, and then yeah, most importantly, my wife and I got married years and years ago, but we now have three daughters who are the inspiration for why I started trying to write children's books in the first place. So it was after my first daughter was born, we started getting a lot of books as as baby shower gifts, and
Hmm.
there were some, I like to say, there were some I liked, some I loved, and some that made me wonder how they ever made it to publication. And I'm not going
Oh,
to ever name any names because we all have our
yep.
favorites. But
Yep.
it was the rhymed and metered ones that really sort of were like, I would have done this differently. I would, not that I was the expert in anything, but that's really the style of book that made me want to try. I think I can do this. I think I can try to bring some, just the way my weird brain works to it, and was lucky enough to be able to write several rhymed and metered books now. So
That's so cool.
So, could you tell us, have you always been a writer or how did that evolve?
Yeah. How
that's
did you
a
go draw the link from Hallmark to what you're doing now?
I can actually draw the link from sixth grade to what I'm doing now, if that's
Oh,
okay.
Perfect.
So one of the things that I talk to kids about when I do school presentations is my first sort of vivid memory of loving to write. I was in sixth grade, and my teacher at the time gave our class an assignment, and we had to write a 10-chapter book about something we loved more than anything in the whole wide world. So for me, it was Star Wars at the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I wrote a parody of Star Wars called Bar Wars, where all of the characters were candy bars. So
Oh my gosh.
Chewbacca was Charleston Chewy, Han Solo was Jelly Rolo,
Oh my
Princess
gosh.
Leia was Princess Payday, Master Yoda was Master Soda, Darth Vader was Darth Nougat, and the villain was Jabba the Hutt, which was Granola the Nut. And so wrote that, and she liked it. I got a good grade on it, and I thought this is very fun just to kind of come up with different ideas and things. And I had always sort of had a creative writer wiring. Then I got to be a freshman in high school, and I was in algebra class one day, and there was about 15 minutes to go before my English class, and a buddy of mine tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, what'd you write your poem about for English class?" And I went, "Uh-oh, I forgot to write a poem for English class." So in algebra class, I scribbled something down as fast as I could, turned it in the next hour, really didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of months later, my teacher pulled me after class, and I thought I was in trouble because I had a bit of a sassy mouth back then, so that wasn't unusual. "Mr. Heim, can you stay after class?" And she said, "Do you remember that poem you wrote a couple of months ago?" And I had completely forgotten about it by then. She said, "Well, we wanted to let you know that we submitted it to the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets Association, and you won second place at the state competition and fifth runner-up at the national level." And I went, "Oh, that's cool." And she goes, "They've sent you some money." And I went, "Oh, they sent me some money." And I'll just ask you guys, guess how much I won winning that poetry contest back in 1991?
I'm trying to think. I'm gonna guess either like really high or really
I'll say
low.
50.
25.
50,
No,
25.
no. 25.
25, 50, $19. Yeah, you were
No
very
way.
close. It was, for some reason, it was $19.
They couldn't round you up to 20.
That's
Too
right. I
much.
got a $15 check from one of them and a $4 check from the other one. I don't know why it was $19, but it was kind of my first experience with, being compensated to write something. It was my first paying gig as a writer, I call it. And
Right.
it kind of made me wonder, oh, I wonder if I could write words for a living. And so that's where, when I went to college, that's why I went into marketing. And because I had no business being an English major, and I've got no business being an accountant or a financier or anything like that. So everybody will ask me now, how did you get to be a children's picture book author? And what it really boils down to is I'm someone who fell in love with writing at an early age, and I didn't stop.
Mhm.
There's so much pressure as kids get older to conform to what everybody else thinks is cool, that creativity doesn't always come along for the ride as they get older. So one of the things I talk to kids about at school visits is, if you love to dance and somebody makes fun of you at school because you're on the dance team, I want you to dance when you get home at the end of the day, dance in the morning, dance on weekends, do not stop dancing. If you love to write, if you love to draw, if you love to act, if you love to just be creative somehow, because when we're done, our generation is done being creative, or we've written our last story or our last song, or this is the thing that always gets them, if their favorite video game designers are done designing their last video games, because it is creative people who design video games, we're going to need their creativity in the world. So really, that's sort of the trajectory. And then as I got to work at Hallmark, I really got a wonderful education there on creative writing, economy of words, rhymed and metered verse, writing prose, thinking through what audience are you writing toward. And it was while I was at Hallmark that my wife and we had our first child. And had it not been for my experience at Hallmark, I wouldn't have had the education, the creative education that I have, to be able to kind of do what I get to do now. So very, very thankful, grateful for it. And the other piece of it too is I've got a weirdly wired brain, where it's the same reason I can't do what you two can do. My dad's an accountant. I definitely can't do that. I can't be a doctor. I can't be a lawyer, but for some reason I can write the way I write, and I've been lucky enough to find a medium to do that with. So I don't know if I answered your question. Did I
No,
answer your
you
question?
absolutely did. You absolutely did. So, one of the coolest things that I think about you is that you were selected to write some books in Dr. Seuss's name. What's that
Yes.
called? There's a name for that. It's
Uh,
a
I think it's a ghostwriter is
right,
one,
ghostwriter.
but
Right.
I actually do get author credit on all the Dr. Seuss books that I've written.
Good.
It's just on the inside front cover. It says, like the Cat in the Hat books say, it's written by the Cat in the Hat with a little help from Alastair Heim.
Oh, that's
So it's
cool.
kind of a clever little thing. And then when I got to write the sequel to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, They actually, my name's on the inside front cover of that as well. But the story behind that is that story could be probably another podcast all its own, because it takes about a half hour to tell. But it's honestly, the way I describe it, it's luck, timing, and hard work in that order. Because you can work hard to become the most talented at what it is you do, but if you don't have the right luck or the right timing, you're Picasso without a paintbrush. Okay. So the series of events that had to happen took place about over 15 years for me to be in a position where I was in the right place at the right time. My agent, Kelly, actually was in the right place at the right time. I'll give you the very quick Reader's Digest version of it. So I had a manuscript that I wrote that in 2012, my agent had sent it out to a publisher, and we almost got a book deal on it. And it would have been my first book deal. And the thing about children's books is it's very hard. A, it's very hard to get an agent that will represent you, and B, it's even harder to get a book deal. Yeah. So we had an editor in New York who really loved it, but the response was, we love this. However, we just signed a contract on something similar about a month ago, and we need to make sure it's not a conflict of interest. And well, they came back and said, yeah, it's too close to what we already signed, but we like this better. We wish you would have sent this to us a couple of months ago. And I'm thinking to myself, I wrote that story a year ago. That was my one chance. And I was pretty devastated by it, because couldn't I really just wanted to break in and get the first one going. So fast forward a couple of years, I kept sending manuscripts to my agent, and nothing was clicking with publishers. And January of 2014, we had sort of been emailing back and forth, and I knew it had been a couple of years, and she hasn't sold any of my work, and she's got other clients and things like that, and time is money. So I was kind of afraid that she was going to say, you know what, I've tried, I can't represent you anymore. So I kind of panicked, and I emailed her and I said, hey, do you remember that story we wrote called You Say Too, that we almost got a book deal on 2 years ago? Is there any way we can send that out to a brand new batch of publishers? And she goes, you know what, I've always liked that story. Let's go ahead and do that. So in 2014, in March, she sent that manuscript out. In May, it landed on the desk of an editor at a publisher called Little B Books. And Little B Books didn't exist in 2012 because they were a newly formed North American division of a large European publisher. So they didn't exist in 2012. So they hadn't even published any books yet. So the editor gets my manuscript in May of 14. She replies back and said, we love this. We're wondering if instead of it being called You Say Too, would Alastair be open to us calling it Love You Too? And we think it's going to be a daddy and a daughter pig spending their day together. And I thought to myself, I don't care what you call it. Sounds good to me. Let's go for it and do it. And so I had to make some edits to it, and then I got my first book contract in September of 2014. Fast forward to the next year, I got a book deal for my second book, which is called No Tooting at Tea, and I got my third book, which is called The Great Puppy Invasion. And then the editor at Little B Books bought my fourth book, which is called Hello Door. Fast forward again to October of 2018, and my agent sends out a new manuscript to a bunch of publishers, and Random House Publishing is one of those publishers. And the way my agent works is she likes to send my work out and then wait to hear back from all of the editors, whether it's a yes, no, or maybe, and close out the query before we move on to something else. So she had sent everything out in October. She heard back from most of the agencies. I still get rejection all the time. I heard no from everybody on it. That book never did get published. But Random House, the publisher, hadn't gotten back to her before the end of the year. So she followed up after the first of the year and found out that the editor that she had sent it to had retired without replying to the email to say, no, I'm retiring. Sorry, this is not for me. So she spends the next 6 months off and on trying to figure out who at Random House has this manuscript now that's been forwarded to her from that person's email address. I get a call on July 30th or 31st at 2:07 p.m. from my agent, and she said, hey, do you have a minute to talk? And I was down at work at the time, so I kind of slipped into a room and shut the door. And she said, well, do you, I finally figured out who's got your manuscript at Random House, and unfortunately, it's going to be a no on that, but the person at Random House who has your manuscript is the editor who bought your first book and your fourth book at Little B Books. She's now a VP at Random House. And she said she would love to work with, this isn't right, but she would love to work with me again on something. And so Kelly, my agent, replied and said, well, what are you in charge of? What do you oversee at Random House? And she said, I'm in charge of early readers, but also the Dr. Seuss estate. And my agent Kelly said, well, she knew how big of a deal Dr. Seuss was for me. She replied back and she said, well, if there's ever a chance for Alastair to work on anything Dr. Seuss, he would faint at the chance. This is a Wednesday. She replied back immediately and said, well, funny you should mention it. This is 2019. We're in the process of auditioning writers because we want to relaunch Beginner Books with an official sequel to The Cat in the Hat Comes Back. And we want it to be about what would happen if the Cat in the Hat were president, because the election's next year, and we want to have it out in time for the election. So she said, and if Alastair wants to try out for it, we need his first full draft by Monday. So this was Wednesday, and it's a 44-page book. So I got home that night, I kissed my wife and kids goodbye, and I sat in the bedroom for 4 days straight, and I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. Submitted the manuscript on Monday. On Friday, we found out it was between me and one other writer, and she wanted some edits made. So she said to call her. So I got to talk to her, and her name's Sonali. I got to talk to Sonali for the first time. Wonderful, wonderful person. And she basically said, the main piece of feedback for you is we need you to simplify a lot. So when I wrote the first draft, I'm like making up Seuss words like flibbity skibbles and all this kind of stuff, right? She goes, you've proven you can do that. We need you to back that off about 90% and just simplify, simplify, simplify. And said, we're going to give you both till next Friday to submit your second draft, and then we'll make a decision from there. So I locked myself in my room again for a few days and wrote and edited as much as I could. And then on the 15th of August, it was a Thursday morning, I believe, I clicked send on the manuscript, the revisions to Sonali. And then my dad called me from Wisconsin to let me know that my grandma Heim had passed away. And so she was 98, late stage kind of things going on. Wasn't a surprise, but still very sad. And so we knew we were driving up to Wisconsin the next week to go to the wake and the services and all that. So we got up there the next Wednesday, got to mom and dad's house, got changed. We went up to the funeral home, and all my dad's brothers and sisters, there's a ton of them, were there. And gets to be about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'm standing kind of in the lobby of the funeral home, and I can look down, and my grandma's there in the casket, and I'm talking to a cousin of mine who's my age and my wife, and I get a text. My phone buzzes in my back pocket, and I look at it. My agent sent me a gif of the Cat in the Hat dancing, and she said, you got the Cat in the Hat book. And so I was at my grandma's funeral or wake when that happened, so I looked over and I said, Grandma, if you had anything to do with this, thank you so much. You know, it was kind of that kind of goosebumpy sort of moment. So that's really kind of how it came to be. But if, you know, the reason I tell the story like that is if you look back, like what had to happen and not happen, if that first publisher in 2012 had said yes to it, it never would have landed on the desk in 2014 of Sonali, and had that editor at Random House just clicked, I'm retiring, sorry, this is not for me. My agent wouldn't have been trying to figure out that entire year who had the manuscript, and wouldn't have found out about the opportunity at that time. So I can't, it's luck, timing, and hard work in that order. You know, that's really what I equate it to. I'm sorry, that was very long-winded.
No,
That's
it's
fascinating.
It is so fascinating. And I think like what always blows my mind with people in creative fields is the amount of rejection that, I mean, I feel like anybody who's ever been in a creative field just goes through rejection.
We're at Rabbit Hole to see Dave Pilkey from
Did you get to go?
Yeah, yes. We both. Sarah got in. I did not. Got our
tickets. Those tickets sold in like seconds.
Wild.
I know, it was like Taylor Swift all over.
It was Taylor Swift.
I'm ready.
PTSD from Taylor.
But what struck me about his presentation was the amount of rejection.
Insane amount of rejection. I thought it was so great for, and I'm sure you share this too when you present to kids, but I think it's so good for kids to hear that. It just always amazes me that you guys never quit. It's wild.
Yeah. So how does it work when, so you write Cat in the Hat book, how do you work with an illustrator? Do you have any say, or do they take your words and bring them to life? How does that work?
That's a great question. So my process is I always type into a Word document. So I'm sort of inspired by the blank page. I don't handwrite usually. I do have an idea journal that I handwrite into just to keep track of ideas and things like that. But the way it works is I will submit once I kind of know what the story is. And the beautiful part about the relationship with Random House now is that I get to submit ideas to them for consideration. So they've actually there's been two that Cat in the Hat books that were my ideas that I sent to them and they said yes to. So, but in a normal situation is I'll have a deadline that they'll give me, and I'll know kind of what the pagination or what the page breaks already are, because all the Cat in the Hat books are set up the same way. The Grinch sequel is a little bit different, but I will write my first draft and kind of figure out, okay, pagination. Here's where I want to break the page and go on to the next idea, things like that. So I got to think through that a little bit. But the big thing that I do, because I have what I call the curse of the writer who can't draw. I can see it vividly in my brain, but I cannot draw to save my life. If I was in a hostage situation and they told me to draw something, I'd be like, I'm sorry. I can't. I wish I could. So because I've got that curse, what I do is I provide art notes. So if I write a paragraph on a page, I'll put a little parentheses down underneath that writing, and I'll say art note. The Cat in the Hat is driving toward the White House. Thing 1 and thing 2 are in the back seat of the old looking car. So at least I can get what's in my head out of my brain and articulate it through art notes. And so I tend to be guilty of over art noting, like I provide way too much. And my agent's always good about saying, I don't think you need this, leave this in. She's kind of my filter for those things, but she knows that I just need to get the stuff out of my head. Yeah. So all of that goes to the publisher, but art notes are just merely suggestions. It's not directive on my part because they have a whole art direction department, and the illustrator brings their own ideas to it too. So you don't want to prescribe too much. On a lot of my other non-Dr. Seuss books, I've tried to pull back a little bit on that, because what I'm always blown away by is whenever I get illustrations for the first time from an illustrator, they put something different into it that I never could have imagined, and it's always so much better than I thought. So once that happens, the artist works with the art department to figure out, you know what he's got here. Let's go down with that path. And sorry, I just heard a weird noise over there. Let me start over. Either they can take the suggestions or they come up with something sort of completely different on their own, and I'll get that back, and it's even better than what I put in the art note to begin with. Interesting. So that's a lot of the process right there.
So like your book, you mentioned No Tooting at Tea, which we had talked previously was inspired by your daughters.
Yes.
Do you get to say, this is what my daughters look like and I want them represented in the book, or is that totally out of your hands?
That is a really, really good question. I will tell you, that is one of the weirdest things that ever happened before, is that I wrote the story, and I wrote that in 2014, and my agent sent it out in 2015. And when in the art notes, I said 3 sisters are having a tea party. We got the sample illustrations back from Sarah Knott, who illustrated it, and the 3 girls looked almost exactly like my 3 daughters did at the same time, and she'd never ever seen a photograph of them. It was the strangest thing in the world. So there was, and if I had the picture here, I would show it to you, but I think it's buried in a text somewhere. But for that in particular, they could have said, you know what, we don't want it to be 3 sisters, we want it to be 3 friends. So while I can put that in there, it's really because they're the ones who are greenlighting the project. You have to really be open to their feedback and their changes, and that's just kind of the cost of entry for working with a publisher. If you're going to self-publish, you've got all the control in the world, but I don't dare even try to self-publish, because there's risks and challenges and financial things that are tricky as well. So
for sure. Right. Fascinating. So on the tooting for tea kind of note, how has becoming a dad inspired your writing?
No, that's a wonderful question. So I started trying to write children's picture books after my first daughter was born, and because I thought it'd be very cool one day if she could hold up a book that I wrote and say, my dad wrote this. That's really the reason I kind of was inspired to do it. And my girls are actually the inspiration for my first 2 books as well. So my book called Love You Too that I just talked about, that actually was inspired by a car ride home. We lived in Old Leawood at the time, and we had gone to lunch down near where Crate and Barrel's at. Cactus Grill is the restaurant down there.
We go there all the time.
Yeah.
It's delicious. And we're driving home, and we're about 5 minutes from our house, and she starts to fall asleep in the car seat. And as you guys know, if she falls asleep in the car seat 5 minutes from home, she's going to take a 5-minute nap.
Yep. Yep.
We needed to get her home to take a 2-hour nap.
Game over.
So I turned around and I started talking to her, and I said, honey, and she went, honey. And I said, potato, and she went, potato. She started repeating everything I was saying, and she thought it was hilarious. And then suddenly something popped in my brain, and I looked at her, I said, when I say I love, you say you. I love, and then she said you. So the narrative for Love You Too is all that. It's when I say I love, you say you. You guys try it with me. When I say I love, you say you. I love.
You.
I love.
You.
When I say love you, you say two. Love you.
Two.
Love you.
Two.
There we go. And then the rest of the narrative is that same kind of call and response sort of thing.
Cute.
So that was the inspiration for that. And then I still remember this date. On April 15th, 2014, 2 of my daughters were having an imaginary tea party in our office / playroom at the time / dog's bedroom. It's a very small house in Old Leawood. And everything was going along perfectly properly. My oldest daughter was the tea party hostess, and my middle daughter all of a sudden tooted during the tea party. And my oldest daughter looked at her and said, there's no tooting at tea. And I went, that is brilliant. I need to write a story. I actually started writing it there on the computer right after she said it. I said, no tooting at tea. And the original version of the story was, it was a little girl having tea with her toys. And Mr. Train, did you just toot? No, I didn't toot. So, but it became this story through my agent and through working through revisions. It became a story about 3 little sisters that are at this tea party. But yeah, very much so. The inspiration for why I started trying to do this, and then, you know, hearing her say no tooting at tea, it just kind of gives me, it makes me anxious about all the things they said in the rooms I wasn't in that would have made perfect children's books. So that was a big lesson for me, is just listen to kids talk. It's awesome the way they process the world, and you might just get a story idea out of it. So very good question. Yeah, big part of why we're having this conversation here today, for sure.
That's awesome.
Awesome. So what are some of the challenges that you come across frequently, or maybe not frequently, as a writer? Like, do you have writer's block? Like, when you were describing yourself going into a bedroom with a deadline, I feel like I would have been in paralysis.
Yeah.
And not able, like, so what are when you write, what do your challenges look like? Or just in the profession in general?
Yeah. That's also a very, very good question. Couple of things I'll say is, yes, I do get writer's block, but I don't kind of consider it writer's block. I consider it, I'm just not inspired to write anything right now. So I will go months without writing anything or coming up with a new idea. But also, you had mentioned I had 4 days to write that first draft. I'm also a pressure prompted individual. Like my brain will kick into a different gear when I know I have a deadline, and the tighter it is, the more my brain seems to kick into it. I'm lucky that it keeps happening. It doesn't mean I love to live there all the time, because I don't love to live pressure prompted all the time. But having a deadline like that does sort of drive me to get to a different space in my head. And it's sort of like, I talk to a lot of creatives about this, is, you know, back when we were kids, Michael Jordan used to say he was in the zone when he was on the basketball court, right? It's kind of like that. I know how my brain feels when I'm in it, and I just have to stay in it when I'm writing it. But the challenges for me are more about sort of a couple of things. One is the rejection still is tough. I've been lucky enough to have 20 books. Actually, my 19th book just came out, and I've got 9 more coming over the next year or two. And very, very fortunate and lucky that I get to do that. But the publishing can be a very glacially paced industry. Like I said, you turn in the art. Like, for instance, I signed that contract on my first book in September of 14. The book didn't come out until December of 16. Right. So it can take quite a while. So I'll try to do that again. The pace of it can be, you know, and I've gotten more used to it. I'm a little less impatient about everything than I used to be, because I've been lucky enough to have been busy with new projects and things like that. But the rejection can still sting too, because again, I've got the curse of the writer who can't draw. So as I'm writing these things, I can see them clear as day. But when you get feedback from an editor saying, I just couldn't see this as a picture book, or not for me, or we just bought something similar, it doesn't matter who you are in the industry, you know, rejection is a real thing. And the reality of it is that if the person that my agent sent it to decides to open it on a Thursday and the coffee upsets that person's stomach and they're having a bad morning, that could be the reason they say no. They just want to, I'm sorry, I don't feel good. I've got so much to do. I don't have time for this. So there's so much that's not in your control in the publishing industry for sure, which is why, again, I'm very grateful and humbled, and grateful is the word, to have gotten to do what I've gotten to do so far. Because it's very competitive and it's very one person to the next preference. Like, you get a editor who comes back and says, this is not for me and I don't see it as a picture book. And then an hour later you can say, hey, looks like we're going to have an offer on it next week. So it's a different perspective, that kind of thing. But I don't have a lot of challenges finding time to write. It's really about that. Is the spark there for me? Because you guys have done it too. You open the computer, you're about to get to work on something. You look at where you left off and you're like, nope, not tonight. I guess I'll pick that back up some other time. So.
Yeah. What is something about what you do that would surprise people, or just about the children's book publishing world?
That would surprise people. Boy, I think just it's maybe more of the creative side of things is, I think we all have our favorite authors and our favorite illustrators. And having worked at Hallmark for 14 years, I got to work with some of the best writers on the planet. Most of us are our own worst critic and very insecure about, self-conscious about our work. And we're terrified that people aren't going to like our work, even if we've been published and even if we've gotten to do some high-profile projects. I am still my own worst critic. That's another reason I don't have any brown hair left on my head, and I'm blonde now. I like to say I'm blonde. But it really is. It's the self-doubt creeps in a lot. And you look at, authors who've done very, very well for themselves. And I can tell you, knowing as many creatives as I've known who are incredibly talented, they all have the same anxieties and they all have the same self-doubt. But I think that's also what sort of stirs them to be as good as they are as well. Because I like to say you're only as good as your next thing.
Right.
So for me, when I finish writing something, I want the next thing to be even better than that. My wife will tell you that, there's a lot of times I'll write something, I'll be super happy with it, I'll send it off to my agent, and then like an hour later, I'll go to her and say, oh, now I think it was crap. I just think it was not a good story. She goes, stop it. Yeah. It's not, you're fine. So I think I think a lot of creatives you'll ask, they may not admit it, but I think that's a big piece of it is nobody really has all this figured out. We're just trying to make a go of it in a very, special industry. So
yeah, that's fascinating and relatable,
Yes.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is a real
it's a real thing.
Sure.
There was a quote. You guys don't have to put this in the podcast, and actually, it's your choice what you want to put in. But there's a quote by. There's a little thing coming around. I think it was. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody pretty high up in their profession that is very famous. I can't remember who it was. And they said, what the funny thing is when you finally get a seat at the table and you start talking to the other people at the table, you find out, boy, nobody really has this figured out. They were just lucky enough to get the seat at the table. So I think that's, I would take heart surgeons out of that. They absolutely know what they're doing, and thank goodness they do.
We hope so.
But I don't really feel like anybody has expertise in anything. I think we've all got experience. And anytime I hear somebody's an expert in something, I'm always like, this just doesn't. Nobody's an expert in anything.
It goes back to that luck you talked about too,
right?
Some of it's also luck.
Right.
Well, that's a big part of what I talk about too. I'll tell my little story about that real quick. It's quick, I promise, guys. But luck, timing, and hard work. So one of the things that drives me crazy, and it's usually when I see professional sports players being interviewed after a big win or a championship or something. And the interviewer always asks, what do you attribute your win to? And they say, oh, we knew if we did the hard work and we put the plays together and we went in with a plan, we knew we'd be successful. And I'm thinking, you are not giving enough credit to all those things you didn't have control over. And okay, and I also say, okay, that's not right, because if it's a professional baseball player, right? And you think back to 10 years ago, they're playing AAA ball out in Omaha, Nebraska, right? And the scout that comes and sees them that day that ends up signing them to this multi-million-dollar contract, Instead, gets killed in a car accident on the way to see him. I know this is a morbid example, but instead gets killed in a car accident and never signs him, never see, all those other things don't happen. So what I wish these people would say was, you know what, there was a lot of things that just went our way that we there's so much of this we couldn't control, but we had to put the hard work in for the serendipity to happen. Yeah. So that's a great comment. I completely agree with you. Not enough successful people attribute their success to things that are completely beyond their own control.
Yeah, right.
But they'll act like it was all hard work and it was this, and it's like, oh, just be honest. Let's be honest about the things. So,
right.
Sorry about that, Megan.
No, that's great. No, I think that's great. It's a great analogy too. Very yeah, that's perfect. So you alluded a little bit to, you said you have 9 books coming out this next year?
Next couple of years.
Next couple of years. Okay, so the future of your storytelling and writing, you've obviously got those things. So are those projects completed? Like those are done and they're just in the process of being published?
I have one that I'm in revisions on right now, and I have one that revisions haven't started, but the other 7 have been turned in and they're being illustrated, or they are illustrated already. So I've got a series coming out, and it's a 4-book series. The first 2 books come out in July and September. The first one's called Stop That Witch, and the second one's called Stop That Santa. And they're just, fun little Halloween and then a Christmas version of it. Okay. And then I have another book. It's my 3rd in my Big Bub early reader series. It's called Big Bub Small Hat. That'll be out in the fall as well. And then I've got another Cat in the Hat beginner book coming out in the spring. So a lot of them are done and being printed. Some of them are in the process of being illustrated, and some of them, 2 of them are in what I'll call editing, like just word editing. No illustrations have happened. Actually, I'm sorry. The illustrations on the one, it's actually the 4th one in the Stop That series that I'm working on right now. The illustrator is going to start working on that soon.
Very cool.
Okay. Yeah. So where can listeners find your books?
My books are sold in Kansas City. I would recommend going to local bookstores in town, and there's one that I partner with called The Learning Tree that was actually at the KC Mom Collective event. They're wonderful people. I've been with them for 6 or 7 years now. Okay. And if anybody wants a signed copy, all they have to do is go in and say, I want an Alastair Heim book, and if you could sign it for me, and I'll go down to the store and I'll sign it for them. If you're not in Kansas City, I think all the traditional online book retailers, you can get all the books there because everything's published through publishers who have them listed on there. So, but yeah, that's really the best way to get the books. You can see all the books I've done on my website, alastairheim.com, and I'm also on Instagram. I'm dipping my toe in the water on Blue Sky right now.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, going that route, but website, Instagram. I don't have a Facebook page. I know. My wife and I we used to say we're not on Facebook because if you want to talk to us, please give us a call. I don't need to learn about your life through Facebook if you want to.
Right.
So, and actually, as a result of that, we've been left out of invites for like family events and things. And we'll find out like the day before, and my wife will go, nobody called us. And they're like, well, we put it on Facebook.
Oh boy. Mm-hmm.
And we're like, for the 15th time, we're not on Facebook, guys, but
so you're those people.
Yes, exactly.
No,
it's a good or bad thing.
That's great.
And then do you do events when your books get released, or
are
people interested in that?
Yes, I've done several events around town. I've done some at some Barnes and Noble locations here in town. The Learning Tree, I partner with them a lot on events and different things like that. Rainy Day Books, I've been doing some book fairs at schools, which has been wonderful. I've gotten to know those guys a little bit here recently. And then I do school visits as well. So I'm actually, I've got a school visit next Friday here in Kansas City. And then I go to Oklahoma for a few days later this month to do some school visits down there for some schools that requested it. The nice thing about Oklahoma is because the Great Puppy Invasion, I was lucky enough to win the Redbud Read Aloud Award, which is voted on by 40,000 school kids down there. The book has got some staying power down there, so it's really wonderful that I get to go down and visit with kids. But yeah, I do school visits. There's information on my website about how to contact me if you're interested in a school visit, and starting to do some more national visit kind of things too, which is kind of fun. So
that's so
yes,
fun.
absolutely.
Amazing.
Cool.
Alastair, thank you so much. This has been fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you very much. And I am sorry if you heard that buzz. I thought I turned my ringtone off.
I didn't hear a thing.
Getting texts over here.
We had a little meow going on in the background. So sorry if you're.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be at the KC Mom Collective event, and I hope to get to do more of those. And just such a wonderful morning, and I got to meet you both, and it was great. I really appreciate you reaching out to chat. This has been wonderful.
Yeah. You have a fascinating career, so
yes.
Well, thank you, and you guys do too. You do too.
It's fun.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Alastair, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.